Hello and welcome to the Saintly Young Men podcast, a podcast for young men as we journey together on our path towards sainthood. I'm your host for this episode, Michael, here with my co-host Raphael. How are you doing, Raphael?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Awesome. We have a very special guest on the episode today, Mr. Brendan McCulley from the Humanum Project. How are you today, Brendan?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure. Um, so just to start out, we've been asking our guests this question. Who is your favorite saint and why?
So my two are St. John Paul II and St. Mother Teresa. And JP2, I mean, he's formed me in his Theology of the Body.
Absolutely.
He is a spiritual father. He is a hero. His boldness, his courage, his fearlessness, uh, everything he went through from losing his family to pushing through in union with Christ to then becoming Pope. And, he's called the Great. So
Hmm.
just his whole life is a model to the man that I want to be. So he's formed me a lot. And then Mother Teresa, she just has a throughout the past like 5, 6 years, people will ask, who's your favorite saint? And we often
Hmm.
like name the saints or, oh, who's your confirmation saint? And it's like, oh, we choose our favorite saints, but I once heard it said that no, they choose us.
Right.
And Mother Teresa has kind of poked at me the past 5 years
Hmm.
where I wasn't seeking her and she started seeking me. And I did a month-long mission trip in Calcutta, India.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
that also led me to grow closer to learning about her and her life. So those are my two.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's great. Two modern saints. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
Yeah, John Paul II is actually my confirmation saint, so I resonate with that very deeply. That's great. Um, Perfect. As we said at the beginning, we have Brendan McCulley from the Humanum Project on. So, Brendan, could you tell us a little bit about what is the Humanum Project and what is your vision for it?
Yep. So my cousin Connor McCauley and I, we were roommates. We no longer are. We started and launched Humanum Project about a year and a half ago, and we saw the need in our culture, particularly youth and young adults, struggling with questions related to identity, sexuality, and relationships.
Hmm.
And we looked around and we didn't see many young people really dedicating their lives to promoting the biblical vision of why we're male and female. And out of that need and out of just really a call that we felt from God, we launched Humanum Project to educate and form youth and young adults on identity, sexuality, and relationships.
Hmm.
And the main offering with that is in-person talks, retreats, parish missions, training workshops, and then we have some online content as well. But it's a very simple mission. Uh, Youth and young adults centered around the theology of the body. So that's kind of what Humanum Project's all about.
Yeah, that's kind of the reason why we started the Saintly Young Men podcast, is because we saw a lack of good content for young, especially young Catholic men. So
Hmm.
for all the people listening, if you see a lack of something, maybe that's your sign to involve yourself and do it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's great like that very specific mission. I know there's a lot of organizations out there, just Catholic evangelization, um, and just have that really specific mission of targeting the young people, the future generations, and that's how we keep the church alive. And I think um, I've definitely seen the fruits of this next generation, this Gen Z, the generation that we're a part of. Um, Raphael and I. And so yeah, that's fantastic. It's really good to see that that youthful energy and just the seriousness and taking these topics seriously. And I think there was a moment in time not too long ago where it was kind of pushed under the rug, like, oh, let's not talk about that. Um, so it's great to see that for sure.
Yeah.
So Throughout your journey, Brendan, what are the biggest issues you see facing relationships and sexuality today?
Yeah, so let's just kind of look at the statistics.
Hmm.
So we often talk about divorce rate, and the number that pops in everyone's mind, it's 50%, it's 50%. And that's actually wrong. The divorce rate is actually in the 30%, like upper 30s. And it's like, oh, things are getting better. It's like, well, why the decline? Well, because the marriage rate, the amount of people getting married in the United States and Canada in the last 75 years has dropped 50%. And
Wow.
so the reason the divorce rate has declined a little bit is because the marriage rate has declined. It's the first time in history, recorded history, that there are more women over the age of 30 who do not have kids than there are who do have kids. So, what are we also seeing? Well, we all know pornography is just the way of life in our culture.
Hmm.
What has that done? Well, it has trained us to view sexuality as a tool for pleasure and power rather than seeing sexuality as the power to love and give life.
Hmm.
And so I know that I'm kind of rambling here, but I think the main problem, because I've talked with a lot of scholars, my mentor Christopher West about this.
Hmm.
What's the issue? Why is dating culture? Why is marriages? What's at the heart of these problems? And I think, and what they think as well, is pornography and how pornography has shaped our minds and has educated and formed us around sexuality. And it's a distorted view of the goodness, beauty, and sacredness of our sexuality. And so I see particularly young people really the grace that is at work in young people is I've been exposed, I've messed up with my boyfriend or girlfriend, but I want to be better. I want to live a
Hmm.
virtuous life. And the fact that they have that desire is already a grace from God, already a movement,
Yeah, absolutely.
which
Yeah.
is amazing. But I think the problem that they're facing, the struggle they're facing is how do I go on that journey?
Mhm.
How do I get formed? How do I, erase and untwist the distortions that I've been formed by our culture? And how do I get formed in the vision of God for his plan for sexuality? So I think that right there is kind of what young people are facing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I had two questions. One was to follow up on that one. How do you think this modern consumer culture has maybe um, hardwired our brains to be more addictive to pornography and those sorts of things
Mhm.
because it is a consumable? Uh, how would you agree with that statement, or how would you respond?
Yeah, I think it's not just pornography, it's also social media as a whole and the
Hmm.
whole entertainment, television. Since the dawn of that, I mean, everything on media and TV and movies is all about like the most beautiful people
Yeah.
and the lifestyle. And then, as viewers, we're like, oh, that's real. And, oh, wow, yeah, I want that. And it's like, no, 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 that's all of that's not real.
Hmm.
Like, and since we have media, there's so many options now for relationships and dating. And, 100 years ago, it was like you have five options in your neighborhood and you
Right.
choose them. And, and yeah, so I think we're struggling with navigating, okay, what do I do? Do I just delete my social media? And
Hmm.
maybe that might be the solution. It
Right.
might be a detox from screens for a few months and just getting out into the real world. So, I think it's a big issue. I think it's a greater
Mhm.
issue than we um, even imagine. And now we're seeing the repercussions of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's the mindset that we've kind of been conditioned to have from a young age even.
Mhm.
Um, and then the second question was about uh, the young people that are trying to make an effort, like they've slipped up, but they're trying to do better. They're trying to build virtue in their lives. Um, And I think there's so many different options um, out there. Like there's a lot of talk about covenant eyes and that sort of thing. Like just
Mhm.
these filters that are put on the websites, or you delete the social media, or you uh, get a phone that just doesn't have any of that. Um, so there's so many strategies, and I think that um, what would be your best advice for young people searching for a path, like maybe a first step to take?
Yeah, first step to take. I mean, I'm just thinking, as you're talking, I was reminded of this
Mhm.
kid at a retreat, a young adult retreat. He like came up to me like, can I talk to you in private?
Mhm.
And he just started bawling his eyes out. And he's like, I'm addicted to porn and I haven't told anyone before. And he's like 23 years old. He's like, I
Yeah.
haven't told anyone. I've been just I feel so disgusted by myself. Like I feel so ashamed, like I'm better than this. And I was just listening to him, but the one thing I did tell him is like you got to let go of the shame.
Mhm.
Like that doesn't define you. That's not who you are, you know. And I learned from Father Jacques Philippe, no matter what our sin is, if it's the sin of lust, if it's the sin of gluttony, whatever fall we might have, when we beat ourselves up, oh, I'm better than this. Why did I do this? Oh, he says that's another sin of pride. Like the fact that I'm better than this, I'm strong. It's like no, that's your pride. And he says in
Wow.
these moments of slips, whatever slips might be or falls, they should be moments of learning about our need for the merciful love of the Father, and that we peacefully then approach the merciful love of the Father, whether that be in confession, in our room, asking for forgiveness. But our peace should not change. If we're doing great in life, if we're falling into crazy sin, our peace should not change. And I think that's the first thing. A lot of young people, I mean, I just even myself, I remember just beating myself up. I'm better than this. Like, and that puts us deeper in a hole, and it's our pride. So that'd be the first thing. It's like one of my favorite quotes is by Saint Julian of Norwich. And he says, when God sees sin, he sees pain in us. So the next time you sin, and you're just focused on the sin. Why did I do that? God doesn't focus on the sin. He doesn't care about the sin in a sense.
Right.
He looks at the heart, the pain in the heart that has fueled the sin. That's where deep healing comes about. So, okay, now to your question. The first thing is whatever you need one person in your life who you can reveal everything to. Everything. Everything. If you don't, you'll be alone and you'll feel lonely in that. And we're not made for loneliness, we're made for communion.
Right.
So, yeah, when it comes to pornography, if you have an addiction, if you are struggling, who is that person in your life who you trust, who you can open up about it? And then, yes, covenant eyes. And covenant eyes, yes, it's a blocker on your phone.
Mhm.
It doesn't make you quit the addiction or the compulsion that you might have. But
Right.
what it
Right.
does do is it keeps you accountable with another brother who might be in this struggle. Okay, now you're building a relationship of communion and you're open. It's bringing it into the light. That's the first step. We would probably have to do a whole nother podcast episode of maybe steps on the journey of how to get rid of that compulsion. But
Right.
for now, a first
Absolutely.
step I'll just say is that.
No, that's great. Yeah, and I love that, there's practical advice there, but there's also that, um, I mean, I know I'm sure we've all experienced this at some point where um, this kind of shame from the sin, like, why did I do that, right? And we really focus on that, whatever that might be, and so just this steadiness and this peacefulness. Um, I've also heard uh, that the shame and fear it comes from the devil. Um, God does not put that um, on your heart, and so that peacefulness, um, if you can rest in that while you're healing, um,
Mhm.
it's fantastic.
Yeah, one
Uh,
of my favorite quotes by Pope John Paul II on shame, he says in
mhm.
his Theology of the Body, He says, shame is a symptom of man's detachment from love.
Hmm.
So it's a symptom that there's something in my heart that I'm detaching myself from love, whether that be God, even myself from others. And we close in on ourselves, and it's like this alarm, this symptom, like, hey, you're not opening your heart. There's something in you hiding and and pain, and now you're running after things to try to satiate your pain,
Right.
but it's not in a healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I heard Father Mark Schmitz talk about this recently. Um, some of you might know him, but he said something along the lines of sin is our way of trying to be happy without God. Um,
Hmm.
and it's this detachment, right? It's a symptom of trying to. I mean, all these little things we do, um, we're trying to be happy at the end of the day. Um,
Hmm.
and we are on this everlasting journey, it seems, to get back to our true purpose and our true Father. Um, and it's a rocky road, but yeah, absolutely. That's great.
Hmm.
Um, so this is a question I'm very interested in. What should young men be looking for in a relationship, whether they're starting a relationship? I know a lot of us here, well, similar personalities, like do you get along? Um, or should the priority be placed on the shared faith? Like, is it really, really necessary for ca Catholics, um, for both
Hmm.
spouses to be Catholic? Um, and then about the shared vision, like, is that the most important thing, and everything else is secondary?
Yeah, so good question. What should young men be looking for in a relationship?
Hmm.
So the first thing is you got to be attracted to them.
Hmm.
Like you got to be, I mean, yeah, you got to be really attracted to them. And John Paul II talks about this in his Theology of the Body that yes, the beauty of one's spirit and their unique person is what's most beautiful, but the body is beautiful and
Hmm.
and the body is somebody. It's not a shell or something that a person has. It's they are their body.
Hmm.
And so being attracted to them in their whole person, body and soul is you need that. And
Right.
yeah. So um, but don't stop there in your love and attraction for them. Obviously, as you get to know them, it's gonna, the hope is that it deepens and it matures. So, I mean, that's fundamental. You got to have that.
Mhm.
And but secondly, what will happen, and I'll just tell you from my own experience. I am Catholic, and I try to live out my Catholic faith in everything that I do. It's my deepest identity. It's my vision. It's my goal. Everything in life is around that. Okay. Well, what has happened to me when I've dated girls who are not Catholic, maybe just Christian? Because I've been open to going on first dates with non-Catholics. I've
Mhm.
been just first date, just getting to know them. And what will happen naturally is they will know the work I do, they'll know what I'm about, and they're just like, yeah, our values don't align.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Right.
So, I mean, the church permits at times for a Catholic to marry a non-Catholic,
Mhm.
but so it's possible, but there's going to be greater difficulty. I mean, just
Mhm.
very naturally. If your values are not aligned as husband and wife, how are your kids going to be raised? There's going to be friction or division in some
Mhm.
way or another. And it's not to say the Lord could will all of this and bring about sanctity and good from it. It's just not, it's rare. It's very rare. And so for myself, it's really like, okay, like who's a woman that will bring me to heaven?
Mhm.
That's the question. That's the question. Does this person make me better?
Right.
Do they challenge me? Do they help me become virtuous, noble, strong, all of these things? And
Mhm.
and if you say yes, is this woman gonna be a great mother to my kids? If you're saying yes to all of these and you're passionately attracted to her, then it seems like you found her, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
it's,
Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear well this emphasis on like physical attraction because I think there's um at least I've heard like, oh, that's secondary, that you don't need to be worried about that. Like make sure she's a good woman first. And then, if she just happens to be good looking, like okay, that's kind of on the side, right? It's a bonus. Um, but yeah, it's yeah.
yeah,
I'm
yeah, and it goes into at one point the church, like 100 years ago, the church would talk about marriage as the primary goal or end
mhm,
is kids. And the church, I believe it was Pope Paul VI, and JP2 used the words of like the crowning of married love is kids. It's the
mhm,
fruit that comes out of it. But at the heart of marriage, the heart of love between a man is the man and woman.
mhm,
I don't get married so I can have kids.
mhm,
You get married because you're passionately in love with the person, and kids is just naturally comes out and overflows. I mean, it's the crowning of that. So I think, yeah, some maybe traditionalists, we might
mhm.
say, radical traditionalists, we might
Right.
say, yeah, the focus might be on, uh, no, you just produce and you bring more good Catholics in the world. You just produce and the sexual attraction, let's not talk about that. Let's
Hmm.
not talk about it. It's like, it's a part of our humanity. We got to talk about it. And JP2 unfolds it beautifully.
Hmm.
And so, so you're right. You're right.
Yep, we're not Puritans.
Hmm. Hmm.
So w would you say that's an issue facing like why the divorce rates are higher and why this whole the culture around marriage is, do you think it's too centered on the children and less on, okay, yes, you need to really, really build a relationship, just the two of you. Um, do you think that's the part of the issue is this, well, you're just producing kids, like, your wife comes second.
I think, I don't know. I mean, I think that could be, part of maybe, I mean, I think that idea that kids is first is,
Hmm.
is probably more of a traditional view.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think if a person, even in married life, isn't living a chaste life, which chastity is the virtue to order our sexual powers to love rightly. That's
Hmm.
that's what chastity is. It's ordering our sexual powers to love rightly. So if we're Puritans or if we're Pharisees, we might be all twisted up inside. And on the outside, we might look great, like, oh, wow, this family has 8 kids, and wow, they have it all together. But in their hearts, they might be full of lust. And that's what Christ calls us out. Like, look at your hearts. That could end badly, that could end in like an adultery or whatever. So I mean, but I don't think that's broadly speaking the cultural reason why divorce. I think the cultural reason why divorce is so common and the lack of marriages is so common
Hmm.
is I think the sexual revolution in pornography and a contraceptive culture.
Okay. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I summed it up a little bit ago, but
Right.
we've trained our sexuality, our sexuality to be used for power and pleasure. It's all about
Hmm.
me, what I can get out of it, and we tend to use others rather than viewing sexuality as the power to love and life, this
Hmm.
lifelong commitment. So we have been training ourselves that sexuality is just pleasure, momentary pleasure.
Hmm.
Well, if that's what sexuality is, then you are not setting yourself up for marriage and
Right.
kids
Hmm.
because that is a lifelong commitment. And yeah, so a lot of people, I don't want to get married. I don't want to get married. Love's
Hmm.
not real. I can't trust someone forever. And these are just lies. The evil one is getting in. And, and I think that is the reason we're seeing the breakdown of the family.
Right.
Um, because the heart of culture is marriage and the family, and the heart of marriage and family is that intimate embrace. Like that's
Mhm.
literally the cell that produces the next generation. And if we get that wrong, we're gonna get all culture wrong.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yeah, it's more about the the outlook of what sexuality is.
Correct.
That's the issue. That's great. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So Brennan, how can men continue in this lifelong pursuit of a holy perspective of sexuality?
Yeah, I would. So as we kind of talked earlier, we need to have someone who we trust in our life, we can open up about just our own struggles, and that's so needed along the journey. We need to be formed in the theology of the body.
Mhm.
So if you aren't familiar with the theology of the body, I recommend a few resources if you like to read.